Happy Thursday and welcome here to another edition of Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple with you every week as we hit through what we think are 5 of the major headlines surrounding Husker Nation. Obviously, Steve Sipple, a big scrimmage ahead.
Yeah.
But I want to go right away to our guest, headline number 1, because this is a big-time addition, not only to the On3 network, but to the Nebraska fans as well.
Yep.
Let's welcome in Steve Wiltfong, who had been with 24/7 Sports for several years since it started. He's now the Vice President, National College Football Recruiting and Transfer Portal. He's Vice President of explain your title, Steve. I just totally butchered your title, but
Sean,
welcome to On3, and I'm honored to say we get to work together now.
Guys, the VP of College Football National Recruiting and Portal, but door opener, whatever we need around here. I'm just excited to be part of this fast growing, very talented network with fantastic team sites, always the heartbeat of a place like On3 and just so many insiders. I was on Andy Staples' show this morning. I did a show with Tim May earlier this week, who is the biggest name in the Ohio State market, in my opinion. He's crushed it in that space for so long, and on with you guys, the voice of Nebraska athletics. So I'm just happy to be here, lucky to be here, glad On3 wanted me. And, you know, it's been, I think, what am I on, day 11? I'm on day 11 right now. Is it? Yep, April 11th. So this is just a cool time. And to be, you know, I was at 24/7 Sports for nearly 14 years, was there before we were a website. On3's already ripping and running with me, without me. And now I'm here ready to help carry the baton with you guys.
Well, yeah, tell your story a little bit more, Steve, because you had a newspaper background, and On3, Shannon Terry, they identified you way back when. And, you know, fast forward almost 15 years later, you're the biggest name in the recruiting space. I mean, how did you get into recruiting coverage to kind of evolve to where you're at today?
Yeah, so like you said, my first job was in the newspaper world. I was answering the phone at the South Bend Tribune in the sports department starting in August 2000. My first ever byline was a high school volleyball match. Typed up a lot of box scores and things early on, and then covered high school sports. And back then, 23 years ago, newspapers were still big and the internet was on its rise. You know, Rivals and Scout.com existed, but certainly not in the way that they look now. But the South Bend Tribune owned a magazine called Irish Sports Report, and that's how diehard Notre Dame fans would get their information. Blue and Gold Illustrated, which is now part of the On3 platform, was just a magazine without an online presence at that time, and Irish Sports Report was kind of their competitor. And I used to ask them, you know, it didn't take me long to ask those guys, hey, if you got any extra work, I'd love to do it. And the South Bend Tribune was loaded with talent at the time. Eric Hansen was the publisher of Irish Sports Report. He's in the Indiana Sports Writer Hall of Fame. David Haw was there. He's now the voice of Chicago sports and, you know, the Bears, the Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks up there in the Windy City. And Vaughn McClure was working for Irish Sports Report at the time. He went on to cover the Bears for the Chicago Tribune and the 49ers. He was covering the Falcons for ESPN when he unfortunately passed away a few years ago. So I was around some very talented people. And Vaughn McClure figured out, hey, he was doing these Olympic capsules on Notre Dame sports on the last page of their magazine, every issue, which was once a week during the football season and once a month otherwise. And he finally figured out, hey, I don't have to do these Olympic capsules. I can give these to young Steve. So that kind of got my foot in the door of college athletics, because then I started writing stories on those top Olympic sport athletes. So like the top female soccer player on the team, they were competing for national titles, or women's basketball, they were competing for national titles. So there were some really good Olympic sports going on at Notre Dame at the time, baseball. And then that led to them giving me some grunt work on football Saturdays. So now I'm in the press box, holding microphones up, going out to practice, interviewing the third string wideout or whatever. But I was able to rub elbows with other people on the beat. And Scout.com's Notre Dame site was ran by a guy named Mike Frank, who hired me to be his beat writer probably 5 years after I was working at the Tribune. I get over there, and that's when I really realized the diehard space of college sports. You think you're a big fan of your team, you're not, unless you're reading your site or something of the similar capacity. So I get over there and I'm the Notre Dame football beat writer. I'm 24 years old, 23 years old, and I'm writing against some of the best writers in the industry. You know, Brian Hamilton was the Notre Dame beat writer for the Chicago Tribune at the time. He's now at Sports Illustrated or something. Mike Rothstein was for the Fort Wayne newspaper. Now he covers the Lions and does a lot of NFL coverage. And I realized that no one was reading my articles. They were just filler on the page. You have to cover the team. They were there for recruiting. And so self-aware man was like, well, I should be covering recruiting. Now, we had a guy covering recruiting, but I was like, I can help him, you know. And if you guys remember, how long have you guys had your site?
I mean, I've been covering recruiting since about 2000 and been with Rivals. And I was with Rivals first before I came to On3 around that time.
All right. So the articles back then were like 4 paragraphs of just terrible writing. Like the information was good, but like the articles, no one was a newspaper writer. I mean, like for the most part. So all of a sudden I went from like average beat writer to like creme de la creme, like recruiting skills. Like I could write and I could interview, put together paragraphs, quotes and stuff. And I think that really gave me a big advantage. Like right away, I start covering Notre Dame football recruiting and the articles really changed. And so with that, I did a pretty good job. And then Mike Frank took me with him to an ESPN affiliate from Scout, and ESPN allowed me to do some articles for them that were outside of the Notre Dame market. And then 24/7 Sports starts roughly 14 years ago, and JC Sherbert reaches out to me. He runs the Big Spur, but he was doing national stuff at 24/7 at the time. Him and Jerry Hamilton were like the first 2 national team hires at 24/7. And they recommended me to come in and cover the Midwest. So I accepted that position. That turned into Big Ten writer, national writer, director of recruiting, which I was for the last 10 years. And now I'm here with you guys. Very excited about the next 10 years.
Got the newspaper background.
You like that? It's simple. By the way, you guys coordinated the shirts for the interviews, the 2 Steves.
We have similar.
I only had 2 shirts.
Yeah.
So
I
have 2 shirts right now, a hoodie, and a couple T-shirts that I have not put on for this interview or for any interviews yet.
I'm coming to the Elite Challenge just so I can hopefully get some new shirts, Steve, when they have that deal in Nashville. But what do you got, Sip?
Well, you know, Steve, I was wondering, you covered Notre Dame. The market is that's a fervent fan base. Similar markets in some ways. One thing Notre Dame, though, has done well as a program is they've continued to recruit at a high level. They do get some All-Americans every now and then. Steve, what I've been saying in this market is if Nebraska is going to get back to being a top 10 program like a Notre Dame, they have to start getting all Big Ten players again, all conference players again, all Americans even. You don't see them here. What can Nebraska get back into that realm? Do you see that? Can that happen with Matt Rule? We haven't seen it for a while.
Well, you just saw Missouri finish in the top 10 and beat Ohio State in a New Year's Six bowl game. And they've done a nice job in the portal and nice job on the trail. And they're off to a good start this cycle. And you say, why can't Nebraska be a top 10 program if Missouri can't be a top 10 program? And I know the ambition is more than that, but you got to start somewhere, right? And so I think absolutely Nebraska is a place that can get back to it. You just need the right coach. And I'll just say this, like you have Michigan fans or you have Michigan folks or Michigan reporters, all of the above will ask me, now that Michigan has won the national championship, do you think that they can recruit at a higher clip? And I love that people follow recruiting rankings and all of that, but I'm like, What do you mean recruit at a higher clip? They just won the damn national championship. Like, they obviously recruited at a championship clip. We just didn't rank their classes in the top 5. So we almost have to evaluate our, mistakes. And quite frankly, maybe we had some of those Michigan players ranked higher than our peers in the industry, but we didn't have them all ranked high enough, because Michigan's going to have an outstanding NFL draft coming up. They did a good job in the draft under Coach Harbaugh, and they did it in a way where they did land some blue chippers and they did land some front end talent. But a lot of players that they landed were great evaluation wins.
Right.
And then they put them in their program, and they had elite strength and conditioning, absolutely elite.
Okay.
They had some of the best coordinators in college football. So they schemed these guys into the right positions to make plays. They rode with Harbaugh during tough times, the COVID season in particular. There were local media and fans that were ready to be done with the Harbaugh era, despite the fact that this is a man that went to a Super Bowl, went to NFC title games, had Michigan had some really good years. Their only offense was that they didn't beat Ohio State in the last game of the regular season. So Michigan rode that out, and they Harbaugh had to make some tough decisions with his strength staff and some of his assistant coaches, firing Don Brown and getting Mike McDonald in there, who's now the head coach of the Seahawks, and then getting Jesse Minter in there, who's now his defensive coordinator for the Chargers, but he's going to be an NFL head coach probably in 2-3 years. And Sharon Moore, his offensive coordinator, is now the head coach at Michigan. So put together a great staff, schemed it up correctly, built a great culture. And you know what? Matt Rule, that's his track record, right? Now, he hasn't done it on the stage like Nebraska, but he's the best football coach in Temple history. They won conference championship. Then he goes down to Baylor. Baylor is in the gutter with what he had to inherit as a football program and turn them into a conference contender in the Big 12. And now he's at Nebraska, where they have a lot more resources. They have this passionate a fan base as there is in the country. You talk about my background covering Notre Dame. I was inside Notre Dame Stadium in September of 2000 when Nebraska took that stadium over with your Heisman candidate quarterback. And that was a hell of a football game. Notre Dame battled that day, but Nebraska got a good road win. And I think you guys played for all the marbles that year. So we're not like far removed from Nebraska. Nebraska, even in the BCS era, played in some of the biggest games, but it's not going to be easy. But that's the recipe, right, to ultimately win it all, is great strength coach hires, great coordinators, bring in the right-minded guys that fit your culture, high upside guys to develop. They did that at Michigan. We know Coach Rule has a track record of developing high upside athletes, guys that can run, guys with length, guys with position versatility, and they find a spot and they scheme them into the right places. And then you have a head coach that's uber confident in who he is. Sometimes these head coaches are they don't have the command or the control or the fortitude to run a program. We've seen Matt Rule win everywhere he's been on the college level. Nebraska's, it's so sad. You guys haven't won a close game in like 4 years.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for reminding us.
So that's the first thing that needs to change, right? Just learning how to win. Finish games. Like the first game of the year this year was a microcosm of the era previously. Like that Minnesota game, you guys were the better football team that just didn't win the game because of your own miscues. So to fix a culture like that, it takes time. But the right guy is in here. And I'm excited about Nebraska moving forward. And I think that they can win at a high level. And first, you just look at like what Missouri's done or what Luke Fickell did at Cincinnati. That team was not fraudulent. All right. That team wasn't a product of their weak schedule. And they got into the college football playoff. The year before, they took that Georgia team to the wire in a New Year's Six game, and Georgia played all their guys. And that Georgia team the next year wins the national championship. That was a great bowl game. Cincinnati comes back the next year and beats Notre Dame in South Bend, makes the college football playoff, plays a pretty good game against a good Alabama team. And then 9 players get drafted from that team specifically, including their quarterback, and guys get drafted. That was a hell of a recruited and developed team under Luke Fickell. So there are recent recipes that you can point to and say that's Nebraska's formula right there. Player evaluation, development, scheme them into the right spots. It's just going to take some time. And first things first for Nebraska is just learning how to win, because so many just tragic close losses, and none of those games have gone your way. Like 0. It's so weird.
Yeah. And Steve, you didn't mention the words Dylan Raiola, but he's a big name, obviously, out in these parts. You had Dylan Raiola when you were at 24/7, pretty much a wire-to-wire 5-star in the rankings. I know On3 for the most part did until the very end, and that was some pretty good fodder around here that On3 dropped him to a high 4. But early reports on Dylan Raiola have been strong here in practice. I mean, what did you like about Dylan Raiola as a quarterback to have him rated really the #1 guy almost for most of the year?
Well, first of all, On3 liked him a lot too. They just didn't have him as high as other services. So it always fascinates me when it's like so disrespectful. I mean, like what did On3 rank him? What was his final ranking?
I think he was in the top 100,
56, I think.
Yeah, he was like they had ended up having Carter Nelson, I believe.
Right. So second round. Oh, so they like him. It's like, it's kind of funny. Like you'll get a call. What is someone doing wrong to have him ranked here compared to others? It's like, well, I can't say anything bad. We have him in the back of the first round, or we have him in the second round. We like him a lot, you know? So, but anyway, Dylan Raiola, in my opinion, has a lot of arm talent. He's a big physical kid that navigates the pocket well, that can make explosive throws downfield. I think that he's got some creativity to his game, and I think he works hard and obviously has a lot of pedigree to him. Big pickup for Nebraska for a number of reasons. It was fun covering that one down the stretch with the crystal ball flip and the visit, and then just the anticipation, right, of when's this thing going to happen? And then even there was some doubt out there. Is this really going to happen? Even though we all knew behind the scenes it was going to happen, you're just kind of waiting for it to go, and then bam, he's in. And look, it's a lot of oftentimes, man, it's not a good thing if you're starting an 18-year-old on your football team, unless you got a veteran offensive line and some veterans around him that can help him along. But yeah, I have all the faith in the world in Coach Matt Rule, in what he's building, that if Dylan Raiola is QB1 right away, that he'll have they'll put him in position to be successful. But you look at a lot of these quarterbacks that get drafted high right now, very rare are they day one starters. I mean, like Trevor Lawrence had a guy by the name of Kelly Bryant, who my kids don't know who Kelly Bryant is, like they're, but he wasn't asked to come in right away day one and do the thing. Caleb Williams had to beat out Spencer Rattler, and the list goes. CJ Stroud had to wait his turn. Bryce Young didn't start as a
Joe Burrow.
Freshman. Joe Burrow obviously had to wait it out. So it's not ideal, but maybe he can have a Phillip Rivers type run, for Nebraska, where you are that guy right away. But he's talented. I think he's a good teammate, and it's an exciting era to get him in there, and we'll see what happens.
Well, Steve, appreciate you taking the time to come on. And by the way, we've had a delete for years. Fong bomb. Now we can keep the Fong bomb posts on my message board. So that was probably one of the more exciting.
You guys used to delete them?
Well, we kind of let them. Well, we kind of let them go.
It's okay. It's okay. Hey, I think that the Nebraska Nation created that nickname. I really do.
I think you might be right though, because it would just be Fong.
Right.
I wouldn't say we deleted them, but if there was a link or something, we had to take it down. But now you're on our team now, so this is.
I look forward to making more of those predictions and building up the moments for these kids, because I think when these predictions go in, it just gets the fan base. They start to rally and gather around, and they're waiting. And if they're waiting too long, then all of a sudden it's like, are we at the right place? Did we come too early? Like, but I'm just saying, like, this is fun. You guys have a great site. Nebraska recruiting is exciting. Anytime they're about to get a commitment and you turn on the film, you're like, I can see it. This is a young man that he's got a lot of potential. He can run, or he's got length, or he's very productive on Fridays. They got a plan. And this staff, they're not afraid to be first. You know, if they're convicted on a guy, they don't give a damn who else is in the mix. Like, they trust their judgment, they trust their process, they trust their protocols, and so I nothing but respect for it, and excited to see how it comes together. It's not going to be easy in the Big Ten, but it's not easy in the SEC. And Missouri just went out there and finished second in the league, you know, and a top 10 program. So I think that's a good model and a place to just kind of be like, all right, that's where we begin. How do we do that? You know,
Well, Steve, thanks again for the time, and we'll see you in Chicago later this month. Looking forward to that gathering at the Cubs game when we're out there.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Appreciate you taking the time. I'm sure we're going to have you on many times from here on out. And thanks for the time here today.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep. Take care, guys.
All right. On3's Steve Wiltfong joining us here. I mean, he brought it. Now he's connected.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that conversation. Phillip Rivers, first of all, is interesting. I never thought of that one. So he must have been a freshman that came out smoking, right, or did well. The other thing that Steve said it's really interesting. Do you hear him, Sean? He emphasized the strength coach. I mean, get the right strength coach, get the right coordinators. Obviously, you have to have the right head coach. The thing about recruiting and following recruiting and thinking about recruiting, there's a surface level discussion that you have to dismiss, and that is just get the talented guys and throw them out on the field. You should be okay. No, it's not. It's more than that. You do got to have the right sort of trainers. You have to have the right
formula
schemes and coordinators. Yeah. And it all has to come together. That's the beauty of football. It's sort of a double-edged sword. It's the frustration of football that there's so many moving pieces, but it's also the beauty when it's all working. Like when you watched Michigan come in here, he kept mentioning Michigan's recruiting didn't get super high grades, weren't rated super high, but you saw that, Sean, what you saw in September when Michigan came in here, it was a machine. It was a machine. You were watching a machine.
It's an execution machine.
Yeah. And there's a lot that goes into that. So, God, Steve was excellent.
Well, and the other thing I'd say, like for younger people, I always have a lot of people, and same with you, that ask, how do you get your job? How do you get in this? I mean, just hearing his story, it's similar to mine. I mean, he started low.
Yeah.
And I mean,
he was writing capsules for a magazine, capsules on Olympic sports, and
just grinded his way in to become the top recruiting analyst. I mean, I don't think people understand, like, you don't just get that job overnight. I mean, Steve Wiltfong, and just sitting there talking, you could see how much his phone was buzzing like during that.
Well, there's another thing about Steve Wiltfong that jumped out to me, and that is his level of passion. You cannot have, if you go back and listen to that interview, the ground he covers with the depth that he talks about these issues and these parts of college football, it was almost astounding to me. He's not just a recruiting guy. He's obviously follows college football at a very high level and has for years. Like that was extraordinary, I thought.
Well, and the amount of coaches he talks to, I mean, he talks, I would venture to guess hundreds of coaches.
Oh, really?
Assistants, head coaches.
Yeah, he's high level.
He's in the level of an Adam Scheffner, Pete Thamel. Schefter and Pete Thamel type guy for recruiting.
Yeah, that was a joy to have him.
So it's a huge addition on 3 to have him with Chad Simmons and the great team sites we've already added. So thanks again to Steve Wiltfong for joining us here on Headlines. Let's take it to headline number 3.
Okay,
back on a spring practice. Big scrimmage coming Saturday for Nebraska. Probably going to push about 180 plus plays. You know, we've already learned a few things going in. I mean, the quarterbacks obviously are one thing, but they like this offensive line. I mean, we got some nuggets on that today, Sip, on just maybe some of the groupings.
Oh, yeah. I mean, kind of. First of all, I want to back up. Why is it a big scrimmage? Well, it's the first one of the spring. They haven't had a scrimmage yet. I mean, we are
3 weeks. Like Ohio State's playing their spring game Saturday, and Nebraska will be holding their first spring scrimmage.
First of 3. So it's the first of 3. Yeah, Rule today was asked about depth on the Matt Rule was asked about depth on the offensive line, and I wish I would have called this up. I can do it pretty much from memory. And he said he likes the depth of the offensive line. That there are guys on the second and third strings that are showing that they could start and be just fine. And he named some guys. He named Mazuka. Now, by the way, it was informative in some ways because he named some guys that you wondered about, are they first team guys or not? Mazuka obviously isn't. The first guy he mentioned as a second tier guy that was pushing was Mazuka. Now, Mazuka was brought here from Florida, ostensibly to start. So he'll have to push for it. He mentioned Justin Evans, but he also said Justin Evans is a number 1 guard, but a backup, but he plays well at center as a backup to Ben Scott. He mentioned Henry Latovsky now as a second tier player, but he also added that Latovsky gets first team reps at guard, but helps at tackle. So he mentioned Raquan Buckley. Now that would be a pure second tier guy who's trying for time.
Shake Shack.
He mentioned Shake Shack. I think
Jason Machachek.
Yeah, Machachek, who's been banged up a little bit, but is coming on. Those are the guys.
Sam Sledge is backing up Ben Scott.
Yeah, he didn't mention Gatuller Sledge or the other kid in that class from Scotts Bluff.
Knutson.
So that doesn't mean anything, because here's the thing. I want to make something very clear here. I want to emphasize it. Sometimes we do that to these coaches. We kind of put them on the spot to name a bunch of guys, and then when they don't, we read into it. He can't. In that setting, it's hard for him just to reel off everybody. So if I were Gunnar Gatula or Sam Sledge, I wouldn't read into this.
Well, because Ben Scott, when you left, Ben Scott said that Sam Sledge has been working as an understudy.
Okay.
To be the number. So Ben Scott is going to be the guy as a 6-year senior, but ideally Sam Sledge could roll into that and be a 3-year starter, which that's perfect.
Yeah. When you start these line discussions and try to get coaches to talk about the second and third tier guys, it's dangerous territory to enter, because inevitably they're going to leave out a guy, and then inevitably we're going to read into it. And so it's sort of dangerous, but I guess by and large, what you're hearing is pretty good reviews of the offensive line. It's got to take another step. They were better last year, but they got to go another step. There's no reason not to. It's a veteran line.
It's one of the most veteran lines in the country.
Right. There you go.
I mean, Ben Scott, 6-year senior.
Teddy Prohaska's a junior, but older.
Is he a 4th or 5th year guy?
He's 4th or 5th. Bryce Benhart is
he's a 4th. He's a 4th year, because he was after COVID. So he's a 4th year junior.
Benhart's a veteran.
6-year.
Yeah.
Benhart started more. I mean, how crazy is that Benhart will walk away with by far the most offensive line snaps in Nebraska history? I mean, he's pretty much been a 5-year starter.
Right. Justin Evans played a lot last year. Latovsky played a lot last year. You've got Turner Corcoran. He's banged up.
Tyler Knack.
Tyler Knack has come on, apparently, the Utah transfer who didn't make a dent last year, but apparently is now. Came from Utah last year.
After spring ball.
So there's the chart. Thank you, Megan. So there's the names. You don't hear much about Jacob Hood, the Georgia transfer, apparently not quite ready yet. Rule did. He said that Grant Bricks, the
playing tackle,
and has a very, very, very bright future, which made me wonder, could he play a little bit at tackle this year if one of those mainstays goes down? Would it be Bricks that they turn to? You don't know that right now, because you're only 8 practices into spring, but Bricks has the size to do it.
It's going to be a great day for the scrimmage Saturday. It's going to be in the 80s.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see that. I'm not complaining. It would just be nice to see.
And there's no access afterwards either. So, I'm sure we'll have to follow social media and make some phone calls after the scrimmage.
Yeah, to people who watch it.
We're not telling you, Coach Rule.
Right. But anyway, so that's that. The scrimmage, we didn't even mention the quarterbacks. I think one thing the coaching staff will watch from the young quarterbacks. Rule mentioned this today, and I'm just going to paraphrase it. we live in this world now, the Twitter world, where you show a lot of highlights. You see highlights. What Rule says, he says, we had highlights last year, too many lowlights. You have to decrease the number of bad plays, of bad circumstances that you create for yourself. That's the key. You have to eliminate those things. You don't see the lowlights on Twitter.
I mean,
right?
life in general is highlight. Like, you might take 10 family pictures and you pick the best one, the highlighted one. I mean,
highlighted one.
You don't take the one where your kid's picking his nose.
Oh yeah, or yelling or crying. Right, you're right.
Like, and
those should be shown sometimes. That's what life is, right? And that's what football is. It's the bad things that happen. I mean, football. I'm freaked out by football, Sean, because on any given play, nightmares can occur. I mean,
you could break your neck or something.
I
mean, I'm like,
I'm talking more like fumbles.
But
not deaths as much.
I got to want nuclear there.
Deaths as much as like fumbles, interceptions.
Well, I mean, think about okay, great, like Matt Harrion. Like, think about, he was on track to be a first-round draft pick, and he broke his leg.
Yeah, broke his leg
in Missouri.
That was pretty much it, right?
And then he came back, but it was never the same.
Right, wasn't. Yeah,
and he was a first-round pick.
Yeah. Oh, he was that type of guy for sure.
So, all right, let's take it to headline 4. And I want to talk about the young quarterbacks here. We teased it a little bit here, but the early reviews on the young quarterbacks have been promising.
Yes, they have.
Dylan Raiola, Daniel Kalen. And I think the biggest thing is the way these guys carry themselves. They don't look like freshmen, guys that should still be in high school. And you knew Raiola was going to be ready, but I think Kalen, just his maturity and how he's come in. And Mike Huffman would always tell you that at Bellevue West, that he was like a coach on the field. Like almost having another coach on his staff. And so,
isn't that interesting?
The future of that position is really promising.
I think it is. I mean, you're definitely right. Their presence is really strong. They have, and that's important at that position, by the way. Command. It's one thing to command a room, like, in a setting with the media, which they do fine. But they got the important thing is commanding a huddle, commanding the line of scrimmage. And I think they have that. You saw it. We saw a glimpse of it this week because we were able to, thank you to Coach Rule. Thank you. I didn't say this on Tuesday. We appreciated that opportunity to watch some live
teamwork.
Some live 11-on-11 downfield teamwork. And you did see command from those guys. They look fine, right? They don't look like they get rattled. They bring the heat on them too. And they look fine. Now here's the thing though, Sean. We talk about this stuff like, oh, they look so good in front of the cameras and they handle themselves so well. You know what matters to me more than anything? And this is what I'd look for if I was over there. How many picks they throwing? I mean, are they going to cut down on picks?
The old, are they doing an interception drill? That story, that's legendary.
That drill, yeah.
Was it 04?
Well, yeah, it was the first year at Callahan. Bill Callahan. He was letting us watch all of spring practice. We could watch every single
in the fall camp too that year.
Yeah, every single snap. And one day I was standing by you, and Joe Daly was trying to run that offense, that West Coast offense. God bless Joe Daly. He's one of the nicest players I've ever met. A great kid. He was put in a rough position. He's not that type of quarterback running the West Coast offense. And there were guys, defensive backs running back balls on like 6 straight plays. And I turned to you, I said, Sean, are they doing an interception drill? And you just kind of brushed me off, but you said, no, I think he's just throwing interceptions. It was one after another.
I mean, you think about that.
And then what happened that year? One after another interceptions. I mean, it was incredible. They threw a big amount of it.
Well, they were so they had talent on that defense, but they were so limited on offense. They just had to give it to Corey Ross a bunch and kind of chew clock. And
yeah,
but that spring, I'll never forget. Jay Norvell had an analogy because they were going from the option to the West Coast offense, and they didn't scale it back. And he's like, it would be like taking our players and dropping them in the middle of China.
Yeah.
And just telling them to start learning the languages and the customs of China. And nobody knew what they were doing. And that was that spring. I'll never forget Turner Gill, how hard that spring was for him.
Oh, yeah, that was rough for him.
I mean,
coaching receivers.
Yeah, they gave and to coach receivers and the intricacies of the route running and what and
getting lined up right.
And
getting lined up
Callahan would jump him.
Oh, we heard it one time. Yeah, it was about not getting them lined up right. He's like, it was, hey, day 19, and we're still not lined up right. You know, that's what it was.
And that Turner was only there 1 year. I mean, that was a tough. I mean, transitions, as you know, are not easy.
No,
and moving into new offenses, but with these freshmen, I mean, it's been smooth.
I think it has been. Again, we don't see it, and I'd love to know what is the interception count right now. I'd love to know that. I know on Saturday when they went through pretty extensive practice with 1,000+ people watching, interceptions weren't an issue. So I hope that's the case, because that's what marred last season. The quarterback position held that team back largely, and it was largely because Nebraska led the country in turnovers, and most of them came from the quarterback position.
I will say too, the receivers, there's been some young receivers that have emerged. I mean, we know Jamal Banks is a guy, but you know, Isaiah Nayor has come on.
Isaiah Nayor's come on. Ja'Cory Barney's come on, and Demetrius Bell have come on. Demetrius Bell and Ja'Cory Barney. Ja'Cory Barney's a true freshman. Demetrius Bell's a redshirt freshman. Those guys are guys to watch.
Yeah, they've shaken up that pot right there. I mean,
yes, they have.
Those guys have really. I mean, they've
shaken up the pot.
Before those additions of some of those guys, I mean, they got Barney late, they got Banks late, they got Nayor late. You know, they could not have moved forward with the current crop of guys. They needed some more.
No, it would have been tough.
Because Malachi Coleman's coming off injury. Jalen Lloyd is a smaller but fast receiver, really good.
Oh, yeah.
But they needed something more veteran, and they've done that. And they've added some good young players with what they already had. So I think that as well has been a real, you know, upgrade to this roster.
Yeah, I mean, 3 weeks ago, we weren't talking about Ja'Cory Barney, right?
No,
not at all. We weren't even really talking about Demetrius Bell too much.
Well, we've been burned over the years about these Miami kids coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because they haven't had much luck.
Mm-hmm.
So you see all these Miami guys, and you kind of want to just feel like, I'm going to wait to see here because, you know, Frost brought in some really good Miami guys, and not a one of them made it a year.
Some of that was COVID, I think. You know, it was a very tough time.
Remember that receiver? He came, was it not Francois, but they're Fleming. Unbelievable talent out of Miami.
Yep.
Comes in Northwestern.
Looked great.
And had more receiving yards on Northwestern than really anybody did all year.
Mm-hmm.
But then that was the only game he played all season.
Kind of vanished.
Then he skipped town. He left.
Poofed into thin air. He did.
Like, he didn't want to come to practice, but still playing the games. Kind of a problem, you know?
Yeah, that's recruit. I mean, you got to get the right guys here. And let's see if, you know, Barney is that kid. He's from Miami. See if he's the right fit. It seems like it so far. I mean, he's kind of worked his way into a situation where you just kind of say, yeah, he's going to be part of the rotation. I don't know if he'll start, but yeah, suddenly that position looks like it should. I'm not saying it's a great position in the Big Ten.
They have options.
Yeah, it looks more like it should for sure.
Well, and even Vincent Shaver is another Miami guy at linebacker.
Number 51, yeah.
They've brought in some good guys. All right, let's get into our final headline of the show. Headline number 5. Matt Rule and Troy Dannon, the marriage already appears to be off to a strong start. I asked Matt Rule after practice, you know, how much time has he been able to spend with Dannon, and they've been out to dinner multiple times. And,
well, every day they spend time together.
And look, I'm not going to pretend to know for sure, but I never got the sense it was that like day-to-day closeness with him and Trev. I mean, they had a good working relationship, but I don't think they were necessarily going out to dinner and doing things like this. So, I mean, I think these two guys are going to work well together.
Mm-hmm.
Totally different style than Trev Alberts, but I think for the good for Nebraska.
Yeah, I think now they have a relationship that dates to when Rule was at Temple and Dannon was at Tulane. So they're in the same conference. And I mean, right away, there were people telling me, hey, those guys would hang out together, Rule and Dannon, would just informally, you know, at conference meetings and stuff like that, Sean, they had a relationship. Now, I don't know. I think Trevin, I don't know. I don't like to get into gauging people's relationships, but I just know this. Rule said that Troy comes down every day to his office. And here's the key. Head coaches have certain wants and needs for their programs. And Rule made a great point about Troy Dannon. He just came from Washington, which played for the national title. Dannon knows what it looks like.
And he helped Tulane
become a championship level program in the group of 5. So he knows. I just think that Rule gets confidence from a boss having witnessed firsthand a program playing for it all. Washington. He knows that when Matt Rule asked for something that Washington probably already had it, and this is what Nebraska needs, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I was glad you asked that, because Sean, any glimpse into that building, any glimpse into the relationship of that head coach at Nebraska with the AD is important. We need to know that stuff, because it's critical to how the whole operation operates.
Yeah, and I think Dannon's emphasis on NIL is going to be a story.
Yeah.
I mean, there's multiple 1890 events happening. I know they're going to have one for their key supporters at the Pinnacle Bank Arena the night before the spring game with all the coaches and AD. I mean, I just think you're going to see way more public visibility with NIL than we had before.
Yeah, and it's critical. That piece of this whole equation right now in college athletics, I'm not saying it's going to always be this way. It may not be this way in 2 years. But if you're just looking right now, for instance, at what's going on in college basketball, the 1890 collective is gigantic. Fred's got to fill 6 scholarships.
They held a fundraiser at the Final Four.
Yeah, okay. And they have to, because these players command a lot of money. Robin mentioned it the other day, that there's a good forward, a good type of, big man type in the Big Ten. Robin mentioned this the other day. The going rate, and this is not even an all Big Ten player, it's not an all conference player, commands $500,000. You kind of have a lot of money to put together a good roster now.
Well, just getting a Josiah Alec is a 6-figure addition. I mean, pretty much
6 figures.
Any addition is
6 figures
for basketball.
Yeah.
6, because there's less.
Right.
You don't have to worry about 85 players.
I can guarantee you, and I know this, Andrew Morgan, I know, came for 6 figures. Andrew Morgan's he's a guy who averaged 10 points and 5 rebounds in the Summit League. That's a 6-figure player. You're exactly right, Sean. Any guy that you're adding right now is getting at least 6 figures. You need a big pot of money.
Well, and then they took some chances on guys like a Blaze Kate, some of these like guys that are already gone. Mm-hmm. Those kind of guys aren't probably high NIL additions.
I don't know,
but a player that that's going to play for you immediately the next season.
Yeah,
6
figures,
6 figures at least. I mean,
yeah.
Minimum.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying 7 because I don't think they have anybody of that caliber. But
no,
I mean, I think there's only one athlete on campus, and that's Dylan Raiola, that is in that category.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know if there's anybody else. I mean,
like
Robinson and Nash, like they're high guys, but they're Tommy Hill, but they're nowhere near a quarterback value.
No, they're not $1 million players.
But yeah,
it'd be nice to have a few more $1 million players.
Fred's pool of money, Jamal Banks had to not be cheap to get here.
No. And this is all by way of emphasizing to Nebraska fans, who I think are getting this now. It's not only just having a pot of money and then just having Sean sitting over there saying, okay, here's a check. No, it's a very elaborate. This is very elaborate. It involves lawyers and accountants. The Pete family, thank heavens for the Pete family, because they supply
accountants, lawyers, marketing.
Yeah, they supply that. It's just extreme. We learned it under Jared Lambrecht when he headed it up for Frost. It was elaborate. This is elaborate. It's not something that anybody can put together.
No,
you need a legal background. You need some business acumen. It's pretty complex,
and you got to be ready to deal with a lot of things.
Oh, people.
I'll say the year and a half or two that Jared Lamprecht run, just some of the things that we saw and some of the interviews, but just
people stuff,
the life issues that just kind of rolled into that office.
Yeah. Yeah. And now you're dealing with thousands of, you're dealing with athletes who are making $500,000.
And guess what happens when people get money?
It's weird sometimes.
They want more money.
They want more, and it gets kind of weird sometimes.
And it gets ugly.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in a strange part of this. We're in a strange part of college football history right now. I don't know how we're going to look back.
And I don't know how you get it back on the tracks.
Well, there's ways. I'm optimistic.
Yeah,
it's off right now, but it can get back on.
And I don't know if it's as easy as creating a salary cap, because I don't think they could agree on it.
I don't. When you say things, I'm just, you and other people say things like, I don't know if it's as easy as. No, there's not one answer. It'll be an elaborate answer to this.
Because what if they say the salary cap's $25 million? Well, there's some schools that can only afford 10.
Yeah, right. So, no,
but the Big Ten and the SEC, with their revenue from the television, have the ability to create a model.
Yeah,
where they could be equitable. And there's just so much we don't like. The conference situation with Florida State and North Carolina. There's a lot that's going to play out more, but these two leagues are clearly going to kind of dictate where this all goes.
You're very consistent in that take. I think you're right. I'd like to.
Well, look what they've done in the college football playoff.
I'd like to tear it apart. I just don't know if I can.
I mean, they've gotten it where they're going to get 6 of the 14 automatic bids.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, you can tell I'm always I feel some discomfort when we go down this road of saying the Big Ten and the SEC control everything. I don't know if that's healthy. I don't know if that's healthy for Utah. If that's healthy for Missouri, if that's healthy for Oregon State. I kind of wish that it wasn't that way, but it is.
It's good. And again, you can't really get it back.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't give up
on
that.
I will say, like a Utah, a Kansas State, like they can beat somebody on a given day, but in a new 14-team model, you have to have the elite talent to win that type of model, like in a playoff.
Oh, I agree with you.
If you're going to have to win 3 or 4 of those kind of games in a month, you can't like scheme out like a Boise State over Oklahoma win.
Can't the Big 12 be a major player though?
It would take somebody to significantly seed the NIL to make that school competitive.
Well, there's schools in the Big 12 that are playing a major league game in the NIL world, like Missouri. They're paying a lot.
Missouri's in the SEC.
Oh yeah, they're in the
Sipple. What in the hell?
I still think of them as a Big 12 team.
I
still think of Texas A&M in the wrong league. I mean, I do.
Nebraska's not in the Big 8 anymore.
No, they're not. They're not in the Big 12 either. Yeah, thank you. Well, you're right. I wish you were wrong about this stuff, but I think you're right.
Well, the money, they have too much. I mean,
they're just leaps and bounds ahead of the other.
They have the leverage too. Like, we're in these negotiations for the playoff future. We want this much more than everybody else, and we want this many guaranteed spots than anyone else. And if you don't give it to us, we're leaving you, and we're going to start our own thing. And good luck doing it without us. I mean, they can do that.
They can. I don't like it, but they can.
And then imagine a playoff without those conferences.
Oh, it'd be horrible.
It'd be like an FCS deal. It wouldn't. So, yeah, they have the leverage, but lots going on this weekend. We'll have the scrimmage obviously going on, but Husker baseball on the road at Rutgers. Big weekend series there in Piscataway. But great time to check out HuskerOnline.com. We got a promo right now. Get 2 months for $1. Promo code NU1. It's the best deal you're going to get to access Husker Online. For Steve Sipple, I'm Sean Callahan, and thanks to our guest Steve Wiltfong for joining us here on Husker Online Headlines.